It's the morning of your birthday, and you wake up with a weight in your chest that wasn't there yesterday. The sun filters through your curtains the same way it always does. Your room looks identical to how it looked 24 hours ago, but something has shifted, something invisible and heavy has settled into the space between your ribs. Your phone buzzes, messages roll in, happy birthday, they say, accompanied by exclamation marks and cake emojis and heart symbols that feel both generous and suffocating. You stare at them, you know you should feel grateful, you know you should feel celebrated, but instead you feel exposed, like someone has turned a spotlight on you that you never asked for, illuminating a version of yourself you're not sure you recognize. You don't hate attention. That's not quite it. You've given presentations at work, you've laughed at parties, you've been seen before without flinching, but this feels different. This feels like the attention is pointed at something fragile, at the accumulation of years, at the passage of time, at the question of whether you've done enough, been enough, become enough with all those days that have somehow already passed. So you smile, you text back, thank you so much, with your own heart emoji, performing gratitude the way you've learned to perform so many other things. And beneath it all, there's a quiet wish that this day would simply pass without ceremony, without acknowledgement, without anyone noticing that another year has come and gone and you still feel like you are standing in the same place you were before. Have you ever wondered why some people dread the day that's supposed to celebrate their existence? Why a day designed for joy becomes a day of quiet discomfort, of feeling too seen and not seen enough all at once? Why the idea of being celebrated feels less like a gift and more like a burden you didn't ask to carry? There's something happening here that goes much deeper than disliking parties or preferring solitude. This is about visibility and worthiness and the strange, aching relationship we develop with our own existence when we've never been taught how to honor it. Let's talk about what's really happening when you dread your birthday. It starts earlier than you think. Somewhere in childhood, in the quiet moments that nobody remembers but your body never forgets, you learn something about celebration, about what it means to take up space, to be seen, to matter. And what you learned was complicated. Maybe your birthdays were inconsistent, some years lavish, other years forgotten, not because anyone meant harm, but because the adults in your life were overwhelmed, distracted, struggling with their own invisible burdens. So you learned that your significance was conditional, that celebration was unreliable, that it was safer not to expect anything at all. Or maybe your birthdays were always celebrated, but with a strange undertone and obligation, rather than genuine joy. The cake was there, the gifts were wrapped, but you could feel the performance of it all. You could sense that people were going through the motions, checking a box, doing what they were supposed to do. And somewhere in your developing mind, you internalized a devastating belief that you are a burden to celebrate. Psychologists call this phenomenon shame-based visibility. It's when being seen doesn't feel like affirmation, it feels like exposure. It happens when attention in childhood came with strings attached, when love felt conditional, when praise was followed by criticism, or when celebration was intertwined with expectation. Your nervous system learned to associate visibility with vulnerability, with the risk of disappointment or rejection or simply not being enough. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals with anxious attachment styles formed in early childhood through inconsistent caregiving often experience what researchers term celebration anxiety. The study showed that these individuals reported significantly higher stress levels around personal milestones, particularly birthdays, because these moments activate a deep-seated fear of not deserving positive attention or of that attention being withdrawn. This happens because the developing brain is wired to seek patterns. If attention in childhood came with unpredictability, if sometimes you were celebrated and other times you were overlooked, if sometimes affection was abundant and other times it evaporated, your brain learned to distrust positive attention entirely. It became safer to expect nothing, to want nothing, to shrink away from the spotlight, before it inevitably shifts elsewhere. In other words, you learned that it's dangerous to hope that anyone would genuinely want to celebrate you. So you stopped hoping, and that protective instinct, that survival strategy, followed you into adulthood. But there's another layer here, something even more invisible. For some people, birthday dread isn't just about how others will respond, it's about confronting time itself. Your birthday becomes a mirror that reflects not just your age, but your progress, your accomplishments, your sense of whether you've lived enough, achieved enough, become enough. Psychologists call this temporal self-awareness, the ability to perceive yourself across the continuum of time, to see who you were, who you are, and who you thought you'd be by now. And for people who struggle with self-worth, who carry a constant, low-grade anxiety about not being enough, Birthdays become a yearly reckoning with that gap, the space between who they are and who they believe they should have become. Think about it. A birthday forces you to take inventory. It says, here's another year. What did you do with it? Where did you go? Who did you become? And if you've spent your life feeling like you're perpetually falling short, like you're always one step behind where you're supposed to be, that question becomes unbearable. It is like standing in front of a growth chart that you can't quite measure up to, not because the measurements are objective, but because the standard you're holding yourself to was always impossible to reach. The chart was drawn by perfectionism, by comparison, by the relentless pressure to justify your own existence through achievement and productivity and constant forward motion. Research from the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology shows that individuals with high levels of self-criticism experience what researchers call milestone anxiety, heightened distress around birthdays, anniversaries, and New Year's Eve. These moments, which are meant to be celebratory, instead become painful reminders of perceived failure, of time passing without enough visible progress, of the persistent fear that they are wasting their one precious life. And here's where it gets even more complicated. For many people who dread their birthdays, there's also a deep discomfort with being on the receiving end of attention, affection, gifts, effort. Because receiving means you have to believe, even for a moment, that you are worthy of someone else's time and energy. And if you grew up believing that love is earned through what you give rather than who you are, receiving becomes an act of profound vulnerability. You might have learned early on that your value came from taking care of others, from being helpful, responsible, low maintenance. You learned that love was something you had to work for, that affection was a transaction, that people stayed in your life because you made their lives easier, not because you simply existed. This is what psychologists call conditional self-worth, when your sense of value is dependent on external validation, on performance, on being needed rather than simply being. In everyday life, this looks like someone who gives birthday gifts thoughtfully to everyone else but feels deeply uncomfortable receiving them. It looks like someone who downplays their own birthday, who says it is not a big deal or please don't make a fuss, because the idea of people going out of their way for them feels both foreign and frightening. The garden inside you learned to grow by tending to everyone else's soil, and now when someone tries to water your roots, you don't know how to absorb it. The nourishment feels wrong, unearned, like a kindness you haven't yet justified through enough sacrifice. Now let's talk about how this plays out in your adult life, in the relationships you build, the friendships you maintain, the way you move through the world when your birthday approaches. You might become invisible on purpose. You don't post about your birthday on social media. You don't mention it at work. You might not even tell your partner or close friends the exact date unless they specifically ask. And when they do find out, when someone remembers and wants to celebrate you, you feel a strange mix of emotions, touched and terrified, grateful and guilty, seen and exposed all at once. You might minimize it. Oh, it's just another day, you say, waving away any suggestion of celebration. I'm not really a birthday person, and maybe that is true in the sense that you have never felt comfortable being a birthday person, but beneath that casual dismissal is a deeper truth. You don't believe you deserve a day that is entirely about you. You might redirect attention. If someone throws you a party or takes you to dinner, you spend the entire time making sure everyone else is having a good time. You ask them questions about their lives. You make jokes to diffuse any focus on yourself. You become the host of your own celebration because being the center of attention feels like standing naked in a crowded room, vulnerable, exposed, waiting for someone to point out all the ways you don't measure up. You might feel nothing at all. Birthdays come and go, and you're numb to them. Not sad, not happy, just absent. It's as if the day happens to someone else, someone you're watching from a distance. This emotional flatness is your nervous system's way of protecting you. If you don't feel anything, you can't be disappointed. If you don't expect anything, you can't be hurt when expectations aren't met. You might overcompensate in the opposite direction. You throw yourself elaborate parties, post extensively on social media, do everything you can to make your birthday seem joyful and significant, but underneath the performance is a desperate attempt to prove to yourself and everyone else that you matter, that you're worth celebrating, that your existence isn't a burden. The celebration becomes a mask for the emptiness beneath it. But here's the truth. Whether you hide from your birthday or perform celebration, the root is the same. You struggle to hold space for your own existence without justifying it. Think about this. When someone you love has a birthday, you probably celebrate them wholeheartedly. You plan something thoughtful. You tell them how much they mean to you. You make them feel seen and valued and appreciated. You don't question whether they deserve it. Of course they do. Their existence is enough. Their presence in your life is a gift in itself. But when it comes to your own birthday, that same grace disappears. Suddenly, your existence needs to be earned. Suddenly, you need a list of accomplishments to justify why anyone should take time out of their day to acknowledge you. Suddenly, you're not enough just by being you're only enough if you've done enough, achieved enough, given enough to others. Here's where it gets interesting. Research in developmental psychology shows that children who grow up with consistent, unconditional celebration birthdays, acknowledged not as rewards for good behavior but simply as celebrations of existence, develop healthier self-worth and a stronger internal locus of control. They grow up believing that their value is inherent, not conditional, but children who grow up with inconsistent or conditional celebration often struggle with what researchers call earned existence beliefs, the internalized conviction that their right to take up space must be constantly justified. And yet, you keep showing up for everyone else's birthdays. You remember the dates, you send the messages, you make the effort, because somewhere inside you know that celebration matters. You just don't know how to let it matter for you. You might find yourself apologizing. Sorry if this is an inconvenience, you say when someone wants to take you to dinner. You really didn't have to. You insist when someone gives you a gift. Even your gratitude is laced with guilt, as if their kindness is a burden you've imposed rather than a gesture they chose to offer. You might feel fraudulent. People are celebrating you, and part of you feels like you're tricking them, like if they really knew you, really saw the version of yourself you keep hidden, they wouldn't be here at all. This is what psychologists call imposter syndrome, but it extends beyond professional achievement into the realm of basic worthiness. You feel like an imposter in your own life, as if you're occupying a space that rightfully belongs to someone more deserving. You might sabotage the day entirely. You pick a fight with your partner the morning of your birthday. You cancel plans last minute. You get sick not intentionally, but your body has learned that stress manifests as illness, that shutting down is easier than showing up vulnerable. You create chaos because chaos is familiar, because conflict gives you something concrete to focus on instead of sitting with the unbearable discomfort of being celebrated. You might compare. You scroll through social media on your birthday and see how other people celebrate theirs, the surprise parties, the romantic gestures, the elaborate vacations, and instead of recognizing that everyone's experience is different, you measure your own birthday against theirs and find yourself lacking. Their celebration becomes evidence that you are not loved enough, not important enough, not worth that level of effort or affection. You might grieve, not for what is, but for what wasn't. Your birthday becomes a reminder of all the birthdays in childhood that felt hollow. All the times you wished someone would see you and really celebrate you. All the ways you learned to lower your expectations until they disappeared entirely. The sadness isn't about today, it's about every yesterday that taught you not to hope for today. The quietest people often carry the heaviest disappointments. And the people who say birthdays don't matter are often the ones who wish, more than anything, that they did. You navigate relationships differently when you dread your birthday. Romantic partners might feel confused, they want to celebrate you, and you keep pushing them away. Friends might stop trying after a while, interpreting your discomfort as disinterest when really it's disbelief. You create distance around the very moments designed to bring people closer, because closeness requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires believing you won't be abandoned once someone sees the truth of who you are. At work, you're the person who never mentions your birthday, who brushes off any acknowledgement, who feels deeply uncomfortable when coworkers sing or bring cake. Not because you're ungrateful, but because professional spaces already require so much performance, and a birthday celebration feels like yet another moment where you have to pretend to be fine, to be happy, to be someone who knows how to receive attention without falling apart. But here's what nobody tells you. The discomfort you feel on your birthday isn't about the day itself. It's about what the day represents: worthiness, visibility, the terrifying possibility that you might, in fact, deserve to be celebrated not for what you do but simply for who you are. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This speaks to something profound about the human experience, that most of us spend our lives trying to become someone we think we should be, chasing an image of worthiness that exists somewhere outside ourselves, never realizing that the deepest work isn't becoming someone else but returning to who we have always been beneath the layers of adaptation and survival. Birthday dread, at its core, is a symptom of self-alienation. It's the ache of being disconnected from your own inherent value, from the simple truth that you exist and that your existence alone is worthy of acknowledgement. You've spent so long measuring your worth by external standards, by achievement, by usefulness, by how much you give to others, that the idea of being celebrated for simply existing feels foreign, unearned, almost fraudulent. But here's the invisible truth: most people miss the discomfort you feel around your birthday isn't a sign that you are broken or ungrateful or incapable of joy. It is a sign that you have been carrying a burden that was never yours to carry, the burden of proving that your life has meaning, that your existence isn't an imposition, that you deserve to take up space in a world that constantly tells people they must earn their place. Think about the paradox of it all. You are alive, you are here. You are breathing and thinking and feeling and navigating this impossibly complex experience of being human. And yet, somewhere along the way, you internalize the belief that this your very existence isn't enough, that you need to justify it, dress it up, make it palatable and productive and impressive before anyone should bother. Right? For people who dread their birthdays, the shadow often contains the basic need to be seen, to be celebrated, to matter without condition. You have pushed that need so far into darkness that when someone tries to bring it into light, when someone wants to celebrate you, it feels dangerous, exposing, like you're revealing a hunger you were supposed to have transcended. But the need doesn't disappear just because you've hidden it. It's inside you, a quiet ache, a persistent whisper that asks, am I enough? Do I matter? Would anyone notice if I disappeared? And your birthday, with all its forced visibility, brings that whisper to a roar. Here's what's really happening. You're not afraid of celebration. You're afraid of disappointment. You're afraid that if you let yourself want to be celebrated, if you let yourself hope that people genuinely care, you'll be proven wrong. You'll be met with indifference or obligatory gestures or the realization that you matter less than you hoped you did. So you protect yourself by wanting nothing, by expecting nothing, by pretending the day doesn't matter. But protection, when it becomes a way of life, is just another word for prison. We live in a culture that glorifies productivity, that measures human value in output and achievement and visible success. We're taught from a young age that worth must be earned, that rest must be justified, that celebration is only appropriate after significant accomplishment, and birthdays, in their purest form, are the opposite of that. They celebrate nothing you've done and everything you are. They mark the passage of time not as a measure of achievement but as an acknowledgement of existence. And if you have spent your life believing that existence alone isn't enough, that you must constantly prove your right to be here through what you produce, what you give, what you sacrifice, then a birthday becomes an uncomfortable confrontation with a truth you are not sure you believe, that your life has value simply because it is yours. The people who struggle most with birthdays are often the people who struggle most with receiving in general. They can give endlessly, they can show up for others, remember important dates, make people feel special, but receiving requires believing that you don't have to earn affection, that love isn't a transaction, that people might genuinely want to celebrate you not because you have done something impressive but because your presence in their life is a gift in itself. This is the deepest wound, the belief that love is conditional, that celebration the truth. It's a story you learned, and stories, no matter how old or persistent, can be rewritten. Healing begins with witnessing, not fixing, not forcing yourself to suddenly love birthdays, but simply seeing the wound for what it is, seeing how you learned to distrust celebration, how you internalized the belief that your existence is conditional, how you've been measuring your worth by impossible standards that were never meant to be met. You don't need to throw yourself a party. You don't need to suddenly embrace every birthday tradition with enthusiasm. You need to start small with one quiet act of self-acknowledgement. You need to look in the mirror on your birthday and recognize that you survived another year in a world that isn't always kind, that you kept going when things were hard, that you're still here despite everything that tried to convince you that you shouldn't be. That's not nothing, that's everything. The first step toward reclaiming your birthday isn't learning to celebrate. It's learning to grieve, grieving for the child who didn't feel genuinely celebrated, for the years you spent believing you didn't deserve acknowledgement, for all the birthdays that felt hollow instead of whole. You have to mourn what wasn't before you can build what could be. And then slowly, you can begin to practice receiving. Start with something small. Let someone take you to dinner without apologizing. Open a gift without immediately thinking about what you'll give them in return. Say thank you without following it with "you shouldn't have." These moments of reception are acts of rebellion against the belief that your existence is a burden. You can choose to tell people it's your birthday, not as a demand for attention, but as a quiet assertion that your existence deserves acknowledgement. You can choose to sit with the discomfort of being seen without immediately deflecting or redirecting. You can choose to believe, even if just for a moment, that the people who want to celebrate you aren't doing it out of obligation, they are doing it because your presence in their life matters. Healing doesn't mean you'll suddenly love birthdays the way other people seem to. It means you'll stop punishing yourself for finding them difficult. It means you will extend to yourself the same grace you extend to others, that some wounds take longer to heal, that it's okay to honor your pace. The weight you feel on your birthday isn't about the day, it's about all the days before it, the days you learn to shrink, to minimize, to believe that your existence needed constant justification. But you're not that child anymore. You're an adult who can choose, slowly and imperfectly, to build a different relationship with your own worthiness. You don't have to love your birthday to reclaim it. You just have to stop hating yourself for existing, and maybe over time, you'll discover that the discomfort lessens, that being celebrated doesn't feel quite so terrifying, that you can sit in the attention without wanting to disappear. Not because you've fixed yourself or forced yourself into a different shape, but because you've finally given yourself permission to exist without apology. Your birthday is a mirror, and right now it reflects every wound, every disappointment, every moment you were made to feel like you didn't matter. But mirrors can be cleaned. The reflection can change not because you become someone different, but because you learn to see yourself with the same compassion you've always reserved for others. You were born, that day happened. You arrived in this world, and the world continued. Your existence is not an apology, it's a fact. And facts don't need to be earned or justified or dressed up with achievement to be valid. They simply are. So let your birthday be what it is, a mark of time, a reminder that you're still here, a quiet acknowledgement that another year has passed and you survived it. You don't need to celebrate yourself with fireworks and fanfare. You just need to stop punishing yourself for being alive. That alone is a revolution. You have been measuring your worth in years accumulated when you should have been measuring it in moments survived. You're here, and that has always been enough.